In a world fraught with uncertainties, one thing remains certain: the need for preparedness. We live in times where global issues like border tensions, election challenges, and terrorism are realities we cannot ignore. They're not just headlines on a news feed, but scenarios that can impact our daily lives. Preparedness is not about living in fear, it's about taking control. It's about equipping ourselves with the knowledge and tools to face these challenges head-on. We can't predict when a crisis will occur, but we can certainly prepare for it. The key here is to understand our surroundings, to identify potential threats, and to prioritize our needs accordingly. It's about adopting a structured approach to our preparation, starting with everyday items and gradually adding more gear to enhance our resilience. Understanding and preparing for these threats is not about fear, but about empowerment. Let's dive into the rule of 3S for survival, a simple yet powerful framework to guide your preparedness. The rule of 3S for survival is a set of guidelines that help prioritize your actions in a survival situation. It's a stark reminder of the human body's limits and the urgency of certain needs. So, let's break it down. First, you have 3 seconds without security. Sounds extreme, right? But consider this: you're walking down a quiet alley and suddenly, you're confronted by an armed individual. In this case, 3 seconds can be the difference between life and death. Your immediate response, whether it's to fight or flee, is your security. Now let's move from seconds to minutes. You can last 3 minutes without air. This might seem obvious, after all, we need oxygen to survive. But imagine you're in a situation where you're underwater, whether by accident or because of a flood. You don't have an unlimited supply of air, and every second counts. In both these scenarios, the threats are immediate and require instant response. Panic is your enemy. Calm, quick thinking is your ally. It's about training your mind to react to these situations with precision and speed, to know what to do within those precious seconds and minutes to ensure survival. It's also important to remember that these are just guidelines, not hard and fast rules. They're designed to give you a framework for understanding the urgency of different survival needs. Your actual survival time may vary depending on various factors such as your health, fitness level, and the specific circumstances you find yourself in. But in those initial moments of a crisis, whether it's an ambush or a sudden lack of air, the rule of 3S can help guide your actions, help you understand what needs to be addressed first, and ultimately, help you survive. These are immediate threats to life, but survival often demands a longer-term view. In the next scene, we'll move from minutes to hours, looking at how shelter becomes a priority when faced with harsh environmental conditions. So stay tuned. In a survival scenario, the next hours and days are critical. Let's venture into the realm of hours and days. This is when your immediate survival needs begin to shift. If you're stranded outdoors in severe weather conditions, you can last about 3 hours without shelter. Your body is a delicate system, and it's not built for extremes. Whether it's the piercing cold of a snowstorm or the relentless heat of a desert, your body will start to shut down without a protective barrier to shield you. Take, for instance, being caught in a snowstorm. Hypothermia can set in when your body temperature drops even a few degrees below normal. You'll start to shiver, your pulse might slow, and you could even lose consciousness. That's why shelter, whether it's a snow cave, an insulated tent, or a cabin, becomes your top priority. It's not just about comfort, it's about survival. Now let's imagine you're lost in a desert. You've managed to find some shade, so you're okay on the shelter front. But there's another ticking clock. Your body can last around 3 days without water. In the scorching heat, where you're sweating and losing hydration faster than you normally would, water is life. You might start to feel thirsty, your mouth might get dry, and you might feel dizzy or tired. Without water, your body can't function as it should. So what do? You might remember from survival shows or movies that you can extract water from certain types of cacti or collect morning dew with a cloth. But remember, finding water is just the first step. You also need to make sure it's safe to drink by boiling it or using purification tablets. As we can see, the rule of 3S helps us prioritize our survival needs. But survival isn't just about the immediate. Let's look beyond days to weeks and months. Survival often requires a longer-term view. Indeed, when we talk about survival, the immediate needs often overshadow the long-term ones. But let's take a moment to consider what happens when survival extends from weeks to months. First, let's address the physical aspect. It's said that a person can last roughly 3 weeks without food. Now, this isn't an invitation to try it out for an adventure. It's a sobering fact that, in extreme circumstances, our bodies can resort to utilizing stored fat and muscle for energy. Imagine being lost in the wilderness with no access to a regular food source. It's in these situations that our body's resilience becomes evident. But it's also in these situations that the importance of preparation is underscored. Having knowledge about edible plants or basic hunting skills can be a lifeline. Now let's move on to another aspect of survival that's often overlooked: companionship. Loneliness can be a silent killer. In fact, it is said that we can last about 3 months without companionship. This might sound surprising, but think about it. Imagine being isolated in a post-disaster scenario, cut off from family, friends, or any form of human interaction. The mental toll of such isolation can be as devastating as any physical threat. This is where mental resilience comes into play. It's about finding ways to keep our spirits up, to maintain our sanity in the midst of chaos. It might be through finding solace in nature, or keeping a journal, or simply clinging on to the hope of rescue. The rule of 3S isn't just about physical survival, but also about mental resilience. It's about understanding that survival isn't just a matter of addressing immediate threats. It's about preparing for the long haul, for the trials that test not just our body, but our mind and spirit as well. We've now covered the rule of 3S for survival. But how can we prepare effectively? Let's delve into that, shall we? Preparation is key to survival, but how do we prepare effectively? Let's talk about that. Preparation for survival isn't about hoarding, it's about being systematic and strategic. It's a process that starts with the basics, the everyday items that we often take for granted. Your clothing, keys, phone, wallet, and tools. These are your first line of defense against adversity. Think of your clothing. It offers protection against the elements, be it the scorching sun or the freezing cold. Your keys, they provide access to safe spaces like your house or car. Your phone, it's not just a device for social media or games, but a lifeline, a means of communication in times of distress. Your wallet, it's not just for cash or cards, but for identification and essential emergency contacts. And tools, they can be as simple as a Swiss Army knife or as complex as a multi-tool, but their value in a pinch is immeasurable. So you've got the basics. What's next? You gradually add more gear. This is where you need to consider your specific circumstances. If you're in a city, you might want to think about a GPS or satellite communication devices. In a remote area, portable lights, self-defense weapons, or shelter equipment might be more appropriate. But remember, the rule of 3S for survival. 3 seconds without security, 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without companionship. These are the guidelines that should inform your preparation priorities. For instance, if you're in a war zone, your top priority would be security. In a desert, water becomes the most critical need. The threats you might face and your location dictate what you need to survive. So, start with the basics, gradually add more gear, and always consider your specific circumstances. That's the structured approach to effective survival preparation. Remember, being prepared isn't about expecting the worst, but about being ready for anything. We've journeyed through the rule of 3S for survival and explored how to prepare effectively. We've navigated the treacherous terrain of global issues, from border tensions to election challenges, from terrorism to natural disasters. We've learned that preparedness isn't just about hoarding supplies, it's about understanding our surroundings, identifying potential threats, and making informed decisions. The rule of 3S reminds us of our human limitations, but it also underscores our human potential. With the right preparation, we can extend those 3 seconds to minutes, those 3 minutes to hours, those 3 days to weeks, those 3 weeks to months. Preparedness is not paranoia, it's prudence. It's equipping ourselves with the tools and knowledge necessary to overcome adversity. Thank you for joining us today. Your survival is important to us. Please engage with us, like, subscribe, and follow. Share your own tips and experiences in the comments. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay safe, stay prepared.